Hello, it's Coach Aaron Saft on the Running is Life podcast. And today, as promised, I've got Scotty Kummer of 10 Junk Miles with me. Scotty and I agreed just to have a conversation. We had no agenda behind this. We had no pre-planned questions or topics that we wanted to discuss. We just wanted to have a conversation and see where it went. Because Scotty does a lot for this sport. And between putting on races, starting an awesome running group, which we talk about, and his podcast, of course, just a lot that he has thoughts on, and I wanted to hear him. So that's why I had him as a guest. And we're going to continue this conversation, as you'll hear at the end of our conversation. We're going to do a part 2, and it's going to be on 10 junk miles. So I'll let you all know when that comes out. We're going to record next week, and whatever that lands, I will let you know. So, let's get into the conversation here with Scotty, and I'll catch up with you after that. All right, Scott. Scott shared with me his recent unfortunate accident. So, Scott, I appreciate you rescheduling with me. However much you want to share.
I appreciate you rescheduling with me. I felt like the bad guy.
Not at all.
2 days before and to be fair, when I told you that I needed to reschedule, I didn't know that I'd broken a rib. I just knew I had taken a fall and that it was hurting, and I was trying to get to the ER.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitany.
Second time that dog has tripped me. It's just,
oh my God.
She's a puppy. She doesn't, and I've been running with a dog. I ran with my old Doberman for maybe 6 years. He was like the best running buddy ever. But the difference is that had this happened with him, he would have laid down next to me and looked at me with great concern and felt guilty for days. The little puppy, she just looked at me like, you are a loser. Why aren't you running? Like she just has no idea that I'm hurting.
So how old's the puppy?
She's about 14 months now.
Okay. Right on.
And then her other thing that she likes to do is she likes to run as fast as she can and then push both of her paws on your stomach, like gut punch you, which with a broken rib feels really good.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. This is your second Doberman?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, what was running with the other one? How far did you go together? What kind of...
Dovey did a 50-mile.
Wow.
In a 24-hour race.
Yeah. Wow.
He did a couple 30-mile races.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
He could just, and this little one, she's going to be even better than he is. She's got about 600 miles so far this year, and she's only been running for like 3-4 months. She never says no. So
that's
they're really good running partners. They're fun to run with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a mini Aussie, and he was my running partner for long time, but he had a knee injury, and at any time he tries to run too much, you can tell he starts to favor that joint. So he's just my walking companion now. But they're just amazing to have as a cohort.
You can learn a lot about running from the dog.
Because
the dog doesn't care about the pace. The dog doesn't like you look down and they just have this look on their face like this is the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And they're doing the same 6-mile run that you've been doing every day for the last 8 years, but it's like every single run they're so present and they're so happy.
Running is life.
Yeah.
I don't know if did you watch Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Yeah. So, that's like Danny, just football is life. That's kind of where I got my new company title from. Running is life. It's just that joy, that presence. And you're right. That's what you see when you're running with your dog. It's just this happiness, this joy. And, that's kind of what I try to emulate and show my athletes is that, this is supposed to be fun. We're supposed to have a good time with this, smile and just make it, a joyous occasion.
Well, I think we forget about the fun. Even so today I was talking to a woman. I just got done interviewing her. Name's Sierra DeGroff, and she's the 100-mile champion for last year. And she did the bear, and she's kind of like a roadie kind of, she likes running fast on roads. And she does the hard stuff because she wants to get Hard Rock qualifiers and stuff like that, but it's not her bag. Like it's harder for her. Yeah. And, and I asked her about the bear, and she went into this big, long thing about how, it's the climbing part. And then, she's going on and on. And I just said, Sierra, did you have fun? That's all I care about. Like, did you have fun? And she said, yeah, I did. When you separate yourself from the what pace am I and what place am I and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like at the end of the race, sometimes we don't even ask people that. Like, did
Right.
you have a good time?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I mean, running Badger, it was evident, everywhere. It's like, if you listen to my race recap, we experienced it. Tom and I experienced it at aid stations. The other runners, you've really created an amazing community. It's cool. It's something that I tried to do. We had talked a little bit about, like, I had RD'd for a while, and it was something that I was trying to create, here in Western North Carolina. And, there's some great RDs in our area, obviously. But just what you've done, you've complemented it so well with the podcast. And now the races. And what was the evolution there? It was the podcast first and then the races?
Yeah. So you didn't know about any of that going into the race?
No, I knew about the podcast, and
Okay.
yeah, I knew about the podcast, and I knew you put on races. I was very familiar with all that, but the timeline, what did that look like?
It's all accidental, Aaron,
Yeah.
and all of it just kind of like it kind of worked out of other stuff. Like I was in a running group,
Okay.
in a local running group here in Chicago, and they had a fee that you paid every year, and then they bought gear, and then like there was this whole like nobody really knew where the money was going, and it
Mm.
didn't feel like it was very transparent. And it really felt like you had to know this one person if you wanted to be an ultra runner in Chicago. So
Hmm.
it's kind of clicky. And at some point I just kind of looked at all of it and said, well, this is dumb. Like ultra running should just be everybody who wants to do it can do it and
Yeah.
whatever.
Sure.
So I started my own group and then kind of took over, and that took over all of the ultra running in the Chicagoland area for a while, the
Yeah.
Flatlander ultra runners in Chicagoland. And the whole premise of the group, and this comes from my deep roots in recovery and going to 12-step meetings and stuff like that, was to set up a construct where nobody can be in charge or make money or be in power or feel like, like it's all just really egalitarian, and it's just a running group for the people, by the people, whatever. And I didn't do that setting out to like create anything as much as just to solve a problem.
Mm.
And that group grew. That group's probably over 2,000 people now.
That's awesome.
And, for example, like when they order gear, it'll be like, okay, let's get hats. We'll get trucker hats. All right. We'll get the logo. All right. How much is it going to cost? Let's put in the order, then divide what the cost is by the number of people getting it. And then that's what we pay. And that's it. Like I don't
Right.
even advertise my races in that group. I don't advertise my podcast in that group. That group is just for running, and that's it. And there's very,
Nice.
very simple rules. Just be a grown up and don't try to, take over and stuff like that. So that happened. And then at some point down the road and all of that, I started to organize a couple other things. I organized an ultra runners and recovery group, a couple other things. And then I had this idea. Now, I don't know. Are you like a huge podcast fan too? Do you listen to lots of
Yes.
podcasts?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Running and non-running?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So, I've talked about this before on other podcasts, but not on mine as much. But there was a podcast called Adam Carolla has a famous podcast,
Yeah.
and he had a news girl named Allison Rosen, and she had a segment, like a news segment, and then on the off days she had her own show, and it was called Allison Rosen is Your New Best Friend, and it was her and her friends talking about their lives.
Nice.
And for some reason, I got sucked into this podcast of these just people sitting around talking about their lives, and even my wife looked at me one day and she's like, why the hell are we listening to this? Like, why do we care about these people? But all of a sudden, like, their inside jokes and their little songs, about their kids. And, it's like, these are my
Yeah.
friends, my
Yeah.
podcast friends. So, put a pin in that. Then look at, people are looking at this, Flatlander stuff. We would do group runs. We'd have a lot of people to run with. And then I would get messages from people that I met in the running world being like, oh, I wish I had 20 people to run a 30 miler with this weekend. I'm by myself out here in the middle of Canada, Washington, Idaho, whatever the case may be. And those two things put together in my head. And I thought, what if we started a podcast for runners so that you could have running friends, like fake running friends? I mean, we're real people, but like we're your pretend running friends for when you don't have anyone to run with, so that Aaron could get up on Friday mornings and be like, you know what? I'm looking forward to my long run this weekend. I'm going to do 10 miles with the 10 Junk Miles gang. It'll be a lot
Yeah.
of fun. I'll laugh and catch up with
Great
them.
idea.
And then
Yeah.
it's like you have someone to run with.
Right.
And then all of a sudden at some point, then I decided there's people that I think are interesting in this sport. Now, not necessarily successful or, famous, but just interesting. And what, just for a point of reference, when did you start ultra running? Like what year?
2008.
Okay, so you've been on a long time. So there would be somebody, and this will probably resonate with you, like Vanessa Runs. Do you remember her from California? And she
Yep.
had that book and all that.
Yep.
And I'd be like, God, what's her story?
Right.
I want to know her story. And then I would have them on and just do a one-on-one with them just to get to know them
Sure.
in the format that I use. Then that was the long run. And then at some point, I found this trail, the trail that you were on. Now you didn't get to see the tunnel.
Right.
The tunnel's the best part. It's like awesome. But I went up there to see this tunnel and I took my wife and she's like, why are we going to look at this tunnel? This is going to be stupid. And we're like going through the trail and she's like, this is dumb. And then we finally got to the tunnel and we got like halfway into the tunnel and she got scared because it was so dark and creepy. And I'm like, this is awesome. We need to do a race on this trail. So I started exploring the trail and deciding to do the run. But now all these things, none of them were like based on each other. Like when I remember the first year we put on the Badger, that was the very first race I ever put on. And it was 100K, all the way down to half marathon. That was the whole kit and caboodle. Sure. We had about 520 participants. We had no idea what we were doing, just none. But I didn't realize that people would show up and they would know each other from being fans of the podcast. And that in a sense, they had formed a community amongst themselves, which then after the first Badger led to them creating their own Facebook group and then getting to know each other. And then that just, and then eventually when COVID hits, like my big thing was, geez, what can I do? How can I help people? And the first thing I thought of is I could give them more podcasts. So I did a podcast a day of Meet the Nation, which I would just take people that are in this 10 Junk Miles Nation and do a 20-minute. It's the same questions every time. How'd you get into running? What's your favorite episode? How'd you find 10 Junk Miles? That kind of stuff. And then I also do like a desert island. If you had to go to a desert island and you could only bring one book, album, and movie, what would they be? Thinking that we're all going to be stuck in our houses for the next 80 years. Maybe we need some more ideas of stuff to watch. Anyway, that only made them know each other more and feel even more connected. So then when it came time for you to come to the next race for the 10 Junk Miles, race, they would be like, oh my God, Aaron, yeah, I can't believe your mom escaped from prison when she was a kid, or, like whatever the little fact that they got from you,
right.
They all started to know each other and then that community just grow. And then they had a book club and a movie club and, happy hour, and,
right.
like, it's just, it never ends. Now they go and and a lot of this stuff, I don't really not involved in. Like, I'm not the guy that's in charge of the book club. Someone in the nation is, I'm not even a administrator of this 10 Junk Miles Nation Facebook group. Someone else is, like, all I did was like put it in motion because like, it's kind of like what I said at the race in the pre-race meeting. It's about you. It's not about me. Like the whole idea is not, I'm so cool, you should want to know me and be my friend and follow me around and do fun stuff with me. It's, I want to create a place where you guys can all meet each other and become friends. And that only makes the community better, you better, everything improves once we all get to know each other. And so that, I don't know if that answers the actual question you asked, but that's the path, and none of it was, I want to start a ultra running group. I never said I want to be a podcaster. I never said I want to be a race director. All these things were just like, someone should do this thing. And then, well, fine, I'll just do it. To circle back to the podcast, when I had the fully realized idea of friends and, running and, not being alone, I told this to one of the guys that was in the original show with me. And he just looked at me and goes, well, let's just do it. That's a great idea. Let's just do it. We knew nothing about podcasting. We knew nothing about, we just put this thing up and didn't know if anybody would listen. So that, and the rest is kind of his, and it's all side hustle, like I have a full-time job as a lawyer and this is just, other stuff, but that it just keeps expanding and I don't know when it's going to end.
I just have to just pause for a moment here and just clear my mother's name so everybody listening understands my mother was never in jail,
Yeah.
nor did she have to escape. um, but back to you. Um, what intrigues me too is that, as you said, your full-time gig is a lawyer, but you are a full-time lawyer. You're a podcaster, and you're also an RD. What does your day look like?
Well, it depends on the day. I mean, if
Sure.
it's a
Yep.
day like today, I'm doing this morning. I slept in. We recorded. I do another show called The Morning Show,
Hmm.
and it's a Chicago daily 10-minute podcast just about weather, sports, running news, what events are coming up. And the girl that I do it with, she talks about her workout. It's under the Chicago Athlete Magazine, but it's
Okay.
just called the Morning Stretch with Chicago Athlete Magazine. And I record and produce that with her 5 days a week.
Okay.
So that's usually like 5:15. I'm up doing that, recording that. I got to produce that show on Monday morning. I record my Meet the Nation, that 20-minute interview,
Hmm.
sometime during the week. I produce that and put that up on Monday morning, along with who won the Strava leaderboard in our group, or some links or things like that.
Hmm.
And then once I get done with all that, then I practice law. I do law all day. Now throughout the day, I might get emails related to the race, deferrals, questions, updating books, stuff like that. But I try to focus on, putting in a solid 8 hour day as a lawyer every day. And then it depends what's going on at night. Like I might have a gang show. I might have a show for a different podcast. I might do RD work.
Yeah,
What I always say is you have kids.
I do
How many?
too.
Okay. Yeah. So I say it's kind of like I got three kids and I love them all. And I'm glad that I get to spend time with all of them. And I wish
Yeah,
I could spend all of the time with all of them, but I
right.
can't,
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
So
So I just kind of wrestle with which of the things that I really, really love do I get to do today? And I always feel like I'm coming up short on all of them. And then we may get into, if we talk about my running or lack thereof, that's always the thing that I drop, is like I don't have
that's the
time to
sacrifice.
take care of myself and do my running.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, it's tough to find that balance, and that's why I ask. Because, yeah, I mean, today, like I was telling you, I flew back from Chicago. I got in Asheville at 1:30, came home, dropped off my bags, let the dog out, and then I went to practice with my daughter. That was my daughter time. Came home, cleaned up a little bit around here, and my son was like, "Hey, let's go toss the football. I got some Spanish homework I need help with, so help him with Spanish." Went and tossed football, and then popped on here with you. And today thankfully is my off day, so I'm not running today, but it's a tough balance. People often ask me, like, how do you fit everything in? Well, it's just like you said, kind of making sure that you have what you need to get done. You schedule that time, and if running has to be the sacrifice, then that's what it has to be, because the other things have precedent, and you got to get them done. So
It's the one thing I can screw up.
yeah, yeah, for
I mean, the
sure.
bus has got to pick you guys up to take you to Orangeville, you
Right,
know.
right, right.
But if I
Absolutely.
don't get my run in, nobody dies.
Right, right. Absolutely. No, absolutely. I've come to that point in my life where, it's like running can take the back seat. That's the thing right now. It's like it's not at the forefront. There's too many other
But you're
things.
still killing it.
But thank you. Thank you. I hope to get back a little bit more competitive next year. But it was fun this year.
Now,
And
do
I,
you
and
have your Grand Slam trophy?
I do. Yeah, yeah. It's
Does it have the Badger logo on it?
It does. It says Badger 100, and but I'll show it to you when we get off air. I'll bring it up and give you. I have a picture of it I can send you to.
Yeah,
But
that'd
yes,
be
thank you.
awesome.
I'll thank you on air because Scotty was just amazing. Like when we came to him and said, "Hey, we're kind of in this pickle," he didn't flinch. I mean, it was almost instantaneous. He was like, "Yeah, come." So that was
Well,
amazing.
what would be the reason not to, is what I don't understand.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is when Western States was canceled on whatever year that was, 2019 or whatever it is. Burning River became the replacement in the Grand Slam, and the only thing I can think of is something must have occurred that year, which potentially upset Burning River. So I don't know. I really don't know what the backstory is. They just said no. So that was odd, but because that was what, Vermont, they said, hey, Burning River is giving you 50% off, so I was like, oh, okay. And then, then when they said get the approval, so went to them, they're like, no. I was like, oh, oh, okay. So it was just weird.
That's a
No
weird thing
explanation,
to
nothing.
say no to.
Right, right. Like, what's the, I don't know. Like I said, there must have been some kind of animosity between the two. So whatever it is, I don't know. And I didn't want to get in the middle of it. So I was just grateful when we emailed you and you said, yes, come. Because, we had a blast. My daughter absolutely loved it. My daughter was there. She's 12. She just had a blast. And I brought Jamie Hirschfang from Chicago. She had a blast. Nathan was my main pacer through this whole thing and my main crew chief, and we just had a great time. It was fun sharing it with Tom. I actually coached Tom, and so Tom got through the Grand Slam as well. So Tom's got his Grand Slam trophy with Badger on there, and I think um, Tomo, right? Tomo ran. Am I thinking right? Tomo, from Japan. Did Tomo run?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
I
So
think there was three of you.
yeah, so it was Tomo, Tom, and I. And Tomo, I think, actually did all 5 races. I think he actually did
Nice.
Old Dominion, Western, Badger, Leadville, and Wasatch. I was like, that's incredible. And he killed it. Like, his combined time was amazing. It was probably, I think it was top 10 times since this has been going on since like 1983 or something like that.
Hmm.
Just incredible. So what a fun time. And then, the thing that was just awesome was that anybody I came on, they had a story and they told it. Like, I'll be honest, when and I've said this, that when I went to Leadville, there was little conversation. Everybody was so blasted focused on the intensity of what was going on around them, that nobody really talked much. It was just very just everybody's nose to the grind, right? Whereas with yours, everybody was laid back and enjoying. I mean, there was, obviously people that were trying to compete. I was between the second and third women, and man, those two were, they were after it, and that was great. I understood and I backed off. Like, I didn't try to bother them, didn't try to didn't try to mess up their races at all. But it was just a fun place to be. And seeing Michelle Hartwig there supporting the race, like, Michelle is just incredible. So you have some great people that surround that. And Dollywood, I just enjoyed. Or is Dollywood, right? Or is it
Holly,
was it
Holly,
Hollywood? Sorry,
Holly.
Hollywood. So just some awesome stuff around the race. Like, it's really starting to get its own, sense of itself. The aid stations having their own names and captains. That's cool. I like seeing that. People
Well, and
take.
they're all race directors too, is the
Hmm.
thing. I mean,
Yeah,
so that's like, or just people that are like legends in the industry and know, they know what they're doing.
yeah,
So that, I mean, that, and they always come back. It's always the same people. So
that's
that's
all.
nice.
Yeah,
Once you're there for like 3 or 4 years, you're kind of invested, and then you can't even imagine anyone else running your aid station. That would,
yeah,
that would be
yeah.
terrible.
Right,
So
right.
that I'm really lucky with.
This was what year of Badger?
Well, so it was 19, 20, 20 was COVID.
Did you 20 was COVID? Did you do it in COVID?
No. So
No,
then no 20. Then we did
21.
it in 21. We did in 22. We did. So this was the
So
fourth.
fourth year. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how many people over because you had, I mean, you talked about the distances earlier. You had from 100-mile down to half marathon.
Half marathon. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
so
would
how
say
many
about
total?
500 ish
500.
in the
Nice.
total event.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's so cool. What's your cap there? Did they give you a cap?
Not really.
No,
No. I mean,
that's
I
awesome.
like if we ever became like a states qualifier or became like I think we could be a championship, like 100K or a
Mhm.
50 mile or something like that. I could put 750 on that trail easy for either the Saturday race or the Sunday race. So
Yeah.
I could do 750 in the 100 miler, but it's just, it's one of those things where like people can't do as many hundreds as some some of us do. Like you did 4 or 5 this year. Like
Yeah.
that's not the average. A lot of
No.
people they can only do 1 or 2 or
Yeah.
afford
Well,
to,
that's what
throw
I
in the travel and
suggest.
all that.
Don't be stupid like me.
Yeah.
Don't be stupid.
And if you want to get a Western States qualifier or a Hard Rock qualifier, you're limited,
Yeah,
to doing just
absolutely.
specific races.
And is
So
that something
there,
you
I've
broached?
met people that they wish they could do it.
And have you broached that subject?
I mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, it's a math question. It's not really a
No, yeah,
asking thing. I
right.
mean, it's basically the biggest fields. And I mean, I think we're close. I think we're probably right on the cusp. I think we had 98 finishers, and I think like 100 to 120 would probably get you in. But
Yeah,
then
right.
it's kind of a catch 22 also, Aaron, because you were there, you saw the vibe, you see what we do, and
Mhm.
my answer to all questions related to the race is what would be awesome. Like let's do the things that would be awesome.
Yeah,
And it's not bottom line, money, cost, all that kind of stuff.
right.
So if we were a Western States qualifier and there was 750 people in the 100 miler, I don't know if I can put, 10 kegs of beer out in the park all weekend.
Right. Right.
Or, if we could, then you get people that the problem is that the people that are there for the Badger are there for one of two things. Either they're there for the trail or they're there for the people.
Right.
And they want to be there.
Yeah.
And they want to be specifically there. They don't want to just run a race. When you say we're a Western States qualifier, then you got, Aaron Saft says, oh, well, I just need a qualifier. That looks like an easy one. Why don't I just go bang that one up? Well, then you're a different
Valid.
customer because
Yeah,
you're not
valid.
there
Yeah.
to be part of the community and get to know someone. You're like,
Yeah.
you know what? Screw you. I just want to get my buckle and my qualifier and go home.
Right. Right.
That's a different crowd.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that might change things.
Yeah. So I started a 100 miler here in Western North Carolina with a number of people in the community, and we built the Hellbender 100, and people kept asking like, when are you going to be a hard rock qualifier? Because there's not many hard rock qualifiers on the East Coast.
Mhm.
I think we have two, right? I think it's Grindstone and Cruel Jewel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
I don't think Eastern States has. I don't think they have it yet. I think they're trying, but I don't think Eastern States has their approval yet. So part of the thing with Hard Rock is that there's a limited number of races that they will have, however many it is. We'll say it's 32 races. They have a list of 32 races that will be their qualifier. What has to happen is one of those has to drop off for somebody else to be picked up because they're only going to have so many races. Always, right? That's their limiting factor, is that they're going to have this many races that will be their qualifiers. And then, as you were saying, you have to have a number of specific finishers, right? So our race, we built, we started at about 125 people total because we wanted to make sure it was feasible and manageable for the trails and sustainable for the trails. And then we started to grow it. We're permitted to do 250, up to 250, but we weren't sure that the course could, take that based on crew access and that many runners. So we grew it up to 150, but we haven't got over. Maybe last year we finally got over 100 finishers, but they want consistently you to have 125 finishers, as you were saying. So there's a number of factors that go into you being, as you said, a Western or a Hard Rock qualifier, which, we were hoping to get to the Hard Rock, but, we just haven't been able to be consistent with the amount of finishers. And they want it for a certain amount of years. Like they want you to have, show that you've done it for whatever 5 consecutive years or whatever it may be, just to show that you're going to continue doing this so that you just don't drop off right away. So there's a lot of that went into it, but you're right, and everything keeps evolving, right? Like Western States is adding more qualifiers to its list, so you're adding a number more people that are getting into the lottery. It's a tough spot to be. And UTMB, like that's a whole nother story. The grindstone just happened here, and I heard mixed reviews. I don't know if you've had any runners or encounters with runners that have said
Not
anything.
yet. No,
Yeah,
not
no.
yet.
So they had really rough weather. Really rough weather. It was very rainy. And I mean, there was some people complained about a number of things. It's a new course, Clark Zealand's still running it, but it was he was being kind of squashed on things that he could do or wanted to do by UTMB, so he didn't have like the input like he typically would with UTMB, being kind of that overseer, if you will. So it's, I don't know, it's I have mixed emotions about that, and about like UTMB taking over some of these bigger US events. I think everybody should have a chance to run UTMB. It's an amazing race. Have you been over there?
No,
No. Oh my
not
gosh.
to run. No.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an experience. Whatever race you do, whatever distance, but Oh my God, what I kept saying, because at Hellbender we had points when that was still a thing. You get UTMB points. But I said everybody's got to have a chance, and if we can help become that chance for them to get their points, by all means. But I think I would draw the line at letting UTMB buy the race. But anyhow,
One of my all-time favorite people in the world, Allison Kirk, was a
oh
champion
yeah,
of the Hellbender.
yeah, yes. Yeah, I'm so glad to see she's regaining her health. Yeah, Allison is amazing. She won the first 2 years. I tried to have her come back for the third, but I think that was the year she got into hard rock, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it's funny. The crew for Hard Rock was going to be well, obviously her husband
Mm-hmm.
and a couple other people, but then me and Dusty Olson was going to pace her,
Oh,
and
nice.
Camille Herron was going to come along, and
Oh my
so it
goodness.
was going to be me and Dusty and Camille and Allison, and it would have been really fun if that would have ever happened, but
Oh,
it did not.
yeah.
Dusty comes to a lot of the. He's coming to my next race.
Oh,
He
cool.
came to the Sugar Badger. He hangs out a lot at the 10 Junk Miles stuff.
Oh, that's
He's a fun
cool.
guy to have around.
Yeah. Have you been able to go around Hard Rock at all?
I've been there. I DNF'd the San Juan Solstice,
Okay.
and I've been in the area, but no. Something on my list of things that I've always wanted to do, or to go do a soft rock.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be really fun to do.
That's my favorite race. Man, it's like I'm putting in next year because it's the opposite direction. At first I was like, well, I don't want to take somebody's spot, but then I was like, well, I'm in the veteran field now. I'm not really taking a first timer spot. So if I can do it the opposite direction, I'm going to do it, and then I'll have the both directions. But it's such a neat event. Like, very, it's like kind of what you were expressing earlier. It's just that very close knit community. Everybody's there because of the race and what it is, and it's so cool. Like, I couldn't believe how many volunteers. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I knew X from California and Y from North Carolina and Z from New York. It's just so cool, like how many people come to volunteer at that event and be around it. So people talk, some bad things about it. I understand that it's hard to get into, they do it behind closed doors. So yeah, there's questions as to, the lottery, but I hope people have the opportunity and have the patience to stick it out to get in, because it really is an amazing course and an amazing event. So,
I mean, and I have some criticisms, and I voice them a lot, and I'm sure there's no love lost. And then it also, I should just say, depends on who the people are, because there's some people involved in both states and Hard Rock that when they hear my criticism, they're like, you know what, that's a legitimate concern.
sure.
That's a legitimate, like, I think that we've reached this point in the world. I put up a post today about this cancellation of the Twin Cities Marathon for heat reasons. And it caused this spirited debate, But we've kind of reached this point where if Aaron Saft rolls into my post and says, Scotty, you're way off base on this, we got to worry about, people's health and safety first, or, whatever, then it becomes, you're my enemy, and we haven't really got to the point where we can say, you know what, that's a logical position, and I have a logical position, and maybe I don't side with you, but I see where you're coming from. My complaints about things like Western States and Hard Rock are all coming from the standpoint of, we have this thing in our sport of egalitarianism. The great thing about our sport is that I can line up right next to Scott Jurek at start line, and that we're equal.
Right.
Except when it comes to things like getting into Western States and getting into Hard Rock, because there's some, you'll see a picture of so-and-so who just finished his 24th Hard Rock, which always makes me say, if there's a restaurant in North Carolina and no one could ever get in, and there's a line outside every day of people trying to get in who get turned away every day, who wait in line for years to get in and never get in.
Right.
And you were strolling out after having your 20-second meal there. Wouldn't you feel like kind of a jerk? I mean, I'm not saying you are a jerk. I'm saying it's a bad system, but I would feel bad,
Yeah, well, it's the way it's set up, right? And I mean, there's two things here. When you post something online, there's no conversation, right? It's your words, and then somebody can post their words, and you don't understand the connotation behind it either, right? Like, you don't understand if they're trying to be malicious or if they're just making a statement, right? Mm-hmm. They may not be trying to make an enemy of you. They may just simply be making a statement that has neither positive nor negative connotation to the statement. They're just making a plain statement. But then you put in a rebuttal, and then perhaps it becomes a negative connotation that they're, now going to argue. And so without voice, it's really hard. Like you and I can have a conversation right now, and I could say, the way that Hard Rock's set up is it's hard because, as I just said, my putting into the lottery does not affect the first timers, like, because there's two separate pools, right? So like these guys running 22 times, they don't see it as, well, they're not letting a first timer in because they're not in their pool. Now, if they combine the pools, then yes, then that would be, I would feel awful if I was going for my 24th attempt and like there's first timers that have not made it in 10 years, right? But the way they have it set up, I think it creates a different mentality. And that's, that's the difference. I mean, right or wrong, that's the way they have it set up, right?
Right, but if they set it up a different way,
and that's what I'm saying, right?
More people get in.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is like in the current system, right? That's, that's the way it is, right? Should it change? Well, we can always say, and nothing's going to change unless voices, say something, but it's ultimately up to their decisions, right? Like, Badger is ultimately up to decisions you and your wife make, right? And you can hear people like say something and you can take it into consideration, and then it's ultimately your decision to make. Like, so the Hard Rock has a committee, and that committee has decided, and they changed the veteran pool, the way the veteran pool works. They changed how women's entries are working. So we're evolving there, at least, right? We are starting to see changes. Is there more changes necessary to allow more first timers in? I would say yes. The veteran pool probably should be smaller, in my opinion, so that more first timers can get experience running Hard Rock. Because as I said with UTMB, people need to experience it. And how are we going to make that happen? Well, you need to let in more first timers. Yes, that I agree on that. Absolutely. In the current system, that's, we're limited by the fact that there's two separate pools, and the veterans are not, they're in a sense, the veterans, the way the system is set up, they're not taking away from the first timers because that's the way the committee decided they wanted to move forward. So right or wrong, that's unfortunately the way it is at the moment, and with Western states, they have certain spots that are set aside for, the top 10 returnees, golden tickets, volunteers, sponsorship spots. So, you start seeing how these spots diminish, and you're like, and then, there's people that get super irked, they're in the lottery for 8 years and a person with one ticket gets in, right? It's the first time trying, and this person's been trying for 8 years. Is that fair? I mean, well, it's a lottery, right? So it's so hard.
Well,
right?
It's not really a lottery. I mean, it's a lottery, but it's a lottery that's weighted. It's a lottery where people can bypass it.
Yep.
So
I bypassed
once you do that, then it's no longer really a lottery.
Right. I got a raffle ticket. That's how I got in. Like, so I mean, like there's 5 tickets each year from the raffle. So again, there's spots that are taken away. Like I was fortunate to get in off the raffle. Perhaps I would have got in. I think I had like, I don't know what I was at this year, 32 tickets, I think this year. I mean, who knows? But, so yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a little bit of luck, but yeah. Is it the right system? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Like that's a hard thing with how many people are trying to get into these races these days. It's really hard,
and I think you just can't confuse the fact that there's criticism of the system with saying that, there's evildoers, or that, I'm not saying they're bad people and they come up with a system that's screwing people over. I'm just saying it's unfortunate. The world we're in, ultra runners think, I got to go run Western states. Everybody puts their name in. Everybody, there's like a rat race to get into it, and it has a limited number of entries.
369 or whatever it is.
It's an impossible situation,
right? And Hard Rock's
there are some people, and I did a post a couple of years ago about this where I criticized someone about the coverage, and it just turned into like, like I did something that was defamatory towards somebody's mother. I mean, It's another one of those things that if you don't have a full throttled love for everything that everyone does, then you're a bad actor too, so that's, you grow enemies that way too. But that wasn't really the point I was getting at. The point I was getting at was that I think that you can disagree with or criticize something without necessarily going to war with the person that you're disagreeing or criticizing with. I wish we could get back to that in life.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I wish we could express our opinions without being belittled. That's the, honest truth is that if you put your opinion out there, it's, people feel like they have to attack it sometimes, and diminish you for saying what you believe, and that's hard. Well, we're in that state right now. It's interesting, when you look at the European models versus the American models, and when Europeans come over here to the race, that they're like, what is all this? Like, why do we have all this going on? Like, why isn't it just running? Like, we've gotten kind of convoluted in our system sometimes, I think, with what we're trying to do with everything and keep it politically correct. It's hard. And that's what race directors like yourself face on a daily. You get all these questions and concerns, and people want you to do X, Y, and Z to make it fair to this gender and that gender. And it's hard, man. That's really hard. What it came down to for me was safety. Our race, the Hellbender, when the incident in China took place at the 100K and 21 people died, I ripped out that article and I put it next to my bedstand. And every day I did everything I could to think of to keep those runners safe. I've tried to put every piece I could put into that race to make it safe. And when race day came, we had, 50-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Temperatures dropped in the 30s, and we had a hailstorm. And my nightmare was, coming a reality. I was watching these people go through the night, and I stressed to them the gear that they needed. And for, when they went to the low elevation, the last aid station before they started climbing up towards Mount Mitchell, they were in 50-degree temperatures. But I warned them that the temperature would drop severely as they climbed 3,000 feet up towards Mount Mitchell. And some people, because it was 50, they're like, oh, I don't need my jacket. And so they went up into that weather unprepared. And thank God nobody went hypothermic or nobody went into the hospital. But after that, I decided I just didn't have the nerves to tolerate doing that again and going through that, because, I don't know how you feel, but when I say go, I'm like sending, like, if I have 125 people in my race, I'm sending 125 of my kids out into the woods to go play. Now, I'm scared shitless of what's going to happen to those 125 runners until they get back to me. I hug them and give them a buckle. And when they were up there and that hail was going on, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it except, possibly stop them at that one aid station, because there's a ton of people already up on the crest. I was worried about those people that were up there on the crest. And then, the China incidents running through my head. And that was it for me. I said, I can't, if something were to happen to one of these runners, God forbid, no matter how much safety I put into place, I don't think I could have lived with myself, because, if they had died up there, that would have changed my life. And that's where it stopped for me. I was like, this race is wonderful. I love it. I would love to run it someday. But as a race director, I just couldn't tolerate it. That was beyond me to say, like, this is within me to do year after year, because of my safety issues and concerns, because I couldn't guarantee their safety. And that's what drove me nuts.
So now you've been to the Badger. You've been on my trail.
Yep.
And you probably realize that you could go to sleep on that trail.
Yep.
Maybe for a whole weekend, nothing
Right.
would disturb you.
Right.
It's probably the safest place. The climate is fine. It's, we're never going to have, tornadoes or anything crazy like that. That being said, you cross about 70 little farm roads.
Mm-hmm.
Those little roads
you
cross.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced someone's going to get hit by a car and die. Like, it's going to happen. And there's nothing that I can do about it.
Right.
I warn them. They know.
Yep.
I mean, and keep in mind also that, unlike other races, that's an actual trail.
Yep.
That little kids ride bikes on all day long. Like, that's a real trail.
Right.
So, and people get hit. They get hit on that trail.
Oh yeah.
And, I always tell my niece, or, there's someone's job is to hand me the awards and before I hand them to you.
Right.
And I always tell them that I am stressed to 12 on a scale of 1 to 10 until the last runner comes through.
Oh,
because I am just terrified. And unlike most race directors, or some race directors, I know almost everybody by name.
Yeah.
Like, there are not a lot of strangers in that race.
Right.
And, when I call your wife to tell her that you got hit by a car, you might be somebody that I actually know, know?
Right.
But that's, that definitely stresses me out. And, but I mean, it's a known risk that may happen, and there's nothing I can do,
I know. But at the same time, again, like, post fact, just because of I wear my heart on my sleeve, and if it were to happen to somebody, I would take it on myself. Like, even though I tried to do everything I could, I would, take that to heart, and it would definitely just, change me in ways I probably don't want to face.
Yeah.
So I just took myself away from the situation, making sure that the race would still go on. But, I said, I just can't do it under my direction. It's just, I made that decision,
I
and
totally feel you, man. I totally feel, I know
yeah,
exactly what the feeling that you're talking about because
yeah,
I have it all day.
yeah.
It's,
Oh yeah. I
but
mean,
then,
like
but then
it's,
I also have people that cry in my arms and tell me that I changed their life and that,
oh, absolutely.
they wouldn't be a runner if it wasn't for me. Or, like,
Yeah.
and it's like, I don't want to stop doing that either.
No, I
I
understand
mean,
that. Yeah.
it's
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
tough, but
No,
it's a very, like, both of the things that I do and the things that we're talking about, podcasting and race directing, they're very they're very weird things because
mhm.
there's not, you think that you're gonna, get all this glory and make all this money and be famous and everything's gonna be great, but it really doesn't happen,
No.
and race directing isn't, I mean, I, I pay myself a little bit of money, between all of the things I do, podcasting and race directing. I give myself some money. It's not a lot of money, and it's the hardest money that I make.
Oh yeah.
Because I
Totally.
can make $400 an hour being a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't have to work very long to make more money doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Ooh.
the other piece of it was I had the run shop. I used to have the run store. And when COVID hit, we had a really hard decision to make. I had a business partner, and I said, we either file for bankruptcy, or the other choice was I turn it over to him. I just hand the key over. No money exchanged, just you go on and keep this going. And he decided to go on and keep it going. That being a store owner afforded me the time and the opportunity to be a race director. When I had to turn over to being a coach full time, I needed to direct all my attention towards that because I had a wife and two kids that relied on me and my wife to put a roof over their heads and foods in their mouth. Right. So,
Mm.
as you just said, like, race directing wasn't that, meal ticket, right? Like, I was not making the first 3 years that I race directed Hellbender. I did not take a dime. I wanted the race to succeed, so I did not take a dime. They paid me the final year, but over the course, and I put on a lot of other races, but I never made a lot of money from it. So it was just ultimately deciding, like, listen, like, if I have to focus my attentions on my family and making sure that they're okay, I need to take this seriously. And that's what I ultimately had to decide was, do I have time to race direct? Because that's more of like a hobby for me, right? It's not a job. It's just something I love to do. But, I'd really need to focus on my coaching business and getting it up and going and making sure that it's sustainable. So yeah, I had to give it up. Will I go back to race directing? I would love to. There's thoughts I have, but as we were discussing before the show started, it's just time. It really is time. Like, I want to have time for my family. I want to have time for my runners. I want to have time for the teams I coach, and I want to have time for me too. So that's tough, and that's a tough balance. So something had to give, and unfortunately that was race directing for now. This the most cherished memory I have from race directing was a woman that finished, I think it was, I'm trying to remember if she did a 30K or a 50K, but she finished, and you never know what a person's story is. And that's what I always remind myself. And this story taught me that, was she came across the finish line and she had a hat on and she was weeping. And I'm going to start weeping in a second because this always gets me. She took off her hat and she didn't have any hair. And she said, I just been through chemo and this was the toughest thing that let me know I was alive. She gave me the biggest hug. And oh my God, like you said, it just, holy shit. It struck a chord because, like, you don't know what people are going through, but you can make a difference. And that race made a difference to her. And I was so happy that I could provide that opportunity. So I don't forget that. And I'd love to provide that opportunity again. And maybe someday I will. But you're right. You can make a difference in many people's lives. And, I had many people tell me stories when they crossed the finish line, and there's nothing greater than hearing those stories and hearing their experiences and what they've been through in order to get to that finish line. It's beyond motivating. It's beyond inspiring. It's when you're in a dark moment, you can think back on those times and be like, this isn't anything. I've heard stories that are something, and what I'm going through is nothing compared to, what's going on out in the real world. It's a reality check as to our lives are pretty damn good. We've got it
Oh
pretty
yeah.
damn good, and I recognize that. And I thank everybody around me, yourself included, for everything they do for this community, because we have a pretty damn awesome community of people, just doing amazing things. It's so cool. So, but anyway, I'm sorry. I get cheery every time I think about that story.
Yeah, he's crying, just in case you're listening to this and you can't see it. He is crying right now.
I told you I wear my heart on my sleeve. My listeners know I get weepy sometimes because I am emotional, and things like this, they do mean a lot to me. Um, but yeah, anyway, it's
I usually cry a bunch of times at the race. Like I've been a handful. I mean, I'm also
yeah,
sleep deprived,
yes,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
and I don't remember a lot of it. Like,
yeah, yep, yeah,
like that. It always makes me feel bad when, someone like that lady, let's say
mm,
you run into her two
right,
years from now,
right,
and then she's like, "Hey, Aaron," you're like, "Oh yeah, have you done my race?" Or you're like, "Yeah, I was the lady that took off the hat," and
right,
you're
right,
like,
right,
"Oh, how do I
yeah,
not remember that?"
right,
Like what's
right,
wrong with me?
uh,
But it's overwhelming because you have, I mean, hundreds of those experiences in a day, and
absolutely, yeah,
that's a lot of emotional baggage. I
yeah,
would say that race directing is a lot more emotionally draining than anyone ever thought it would be.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. That day it takes it out of you. I usually, when I finish, when the last person's across, we've got it all cleaned up and everybody's okay. I don't have any more obligations. No matter what time it is, I go for a run. And it's always in Strava labeled decompress because I need time just to, filter through the whole day, everything that's transpired. But that run helps me just kind of process and clear my mind and just kind of get back to that, status quo, because you're so high on emotions, and you need to bring it back down before you can like sit down for the night. Otherwise you're going to be wound up tighter than a ball, and you're going to try to lay down and your eyes are just going to stay open because you haven't had the time to process everything that just went through and all the emotions you went through. So yeah,
Well, I'm usually like I would say over a 3 day period, I sleep like 2 or 3 hours. It's like a long, and when it's over, my wife has it so dialed in. That Badger, we were in our hotel room by 10 p.m. that night,
nice,
and everything was put away and done.
nice,
Like it
yeah,
was closed. And but one of the things that I remember when we woke up this year, I looked at her that morning, like 3 a.m. We're on our way to the park, and I said, the next time we talk, we're going to be saying, I can't believe it's over. Like that's the next conversation we're going to have. And then we go and we do this thing and we don't interact that much, but she basically runs that shit. I mean, she's the boss. And then when we get all done, we get back to the hotel. I'm just like, see, I told you. Like how did that all happen?
yeah,
And what's funny is that like 2 years ago, I woke up the morning after the Badger and screamed that we needed to go. We need to get to the park. We're late for the park. And she had to physically shake me and yell at me and say, it's over. The race is over. Like
yeah.
I was convinced we had to get
Uh,
there and that we were late.
oh my god, yeah.
So it's not all fun and games. That
No,
it's
no,
it takes a lot out of you.
the oh the
But when I'm on my deathbed and I look back, I'm not going to remember the guy that paid me hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. I'm going to remember that guy that cried when I gave him his
yep.
the guy that didn't want to give me a hug, but then I made him hug me, and then once I hugged him, it just opened up and he cried, and like I'm going to remember that guy, or the email from someone that said, I listened to that podcast and I just want you to know that I'm finally going to stop drinking. I'm finally going to leave my husband, or, come to grips with what happened to me in life, or, like all
Yeah,
those life changing, because it doesn't matter who I interview and it doesn't matter what I interview them about. I could do 3 hours with Aaron Saft. And by the end of that interview, we'd put it up and we'd be like, I don't know. I mean, it was all right. Like,
yeah.
I don't think we did that great. And someone will send me an email and I just want you to know that Aaron Saft, that was the one I totally connected with, and you're just like, wow, but it just happens. And then
Yeah.
you're just like, God.
Did you have
It's a really
somebody?
neat thing.
Did you have somebody in your life that kind of helped you pivot when you were trying to get sober? Did you have somebody that was you can think back to that was, kind of like a mentor or really gave you a different insight?
Not
You
not that
decided on
helped
your own?
me to get sober, because I mean, I didn't really get sober until everybody was gone.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
you just destroyed all of your relationships and
gotcha.
lied to everybody and hurt everybody. But I think that once I became sober, well, once I quit drinking, I had a mentor. I was very anti 12 step stuff. Like I was too smart. I was a philosophy major. All these people that believe in God are dumb. All these people that, go to these meetings are dumb. And I was kind of like way better than them. And but I struggled so much with, you know, relationships or my feelings or just like all these things that, when I got sober when I was 21.
Hmm.
And so all the time that I spent medicating was developmental time that I never got. So I
Mm.
never learned like how to have a breakup, how to have a friend, how to tell a friend off, how to have an argument, like all those things. I just didn't have, like adult skills. And I was struggling so much. And I had this one friend, he just always laughed at me. And he's like, well, of course, because you're an alcoholic. Like you're an alcoholic who's not getting treatment, and treatment is, working this program. So I used to go to these meetings. I go to 12-step meetings and just unload on everybody about my problem, and then I would just leave. And I wouldn't listen to what anybody else said or
Yeah.
buy the book or do anything. And then at some point, I was this is weird. I can't believe we're talking about this, but I was driving through California. It was Lake Isabella near Bakersfield, and me and this guy, we decided we were going to swim out to this island. Uh, and I was a swimmer. I had a mile swim patch. I figured it'd be no problem. But it had been, 15 years since I swam, and not a lot of drugs and smoking and out of shape. And this was a big, there are big waves and stuff. And I struggled, and I got about three-quarters of the way to the island, and it hit me that I wasn't going to make it. Like, I'm going to drown out here.
Oh,
And there's not a lot of scarier feelings than knowing that you're going to drown.
right.
And I saw him, he put his arm out and he's like, come, you can make it. You can, somehow or another at the end of all this, I get to this island, I get up and I'm just bawling and shaking. And, like I'd faced death, and he's just laughing at me, laughing. And he's like, you know what, Scotty, this is what life is. This is what life is all about, man. It's like being scared and overcoming what you're afraid of. And it just had this impact on me, this like
Wow.
shift where I just kind of said, you know what? Maybe I'm not that smart. And maybe I could just entertain the fact that maybe these 12-step people know what they're talking about. And just, went in there and said, you know what? I'm going to act as if I'm going to pretend. And then by pretending, they say fake it till you make it. That's
Yeah.
what I did. I faked it. And,
Wow.
the funny thing is there's these institutions out there like church or 12-step groups or, school or, therapy, whatever it is that, nobody ever comes back and says, oh, I wish I wouldn't have gone to therapy, or I wish I wouldn't have, taken those classes, or what. Like these are all things that if you fake it till you make it and you give it a good try, it makes you a better person.
Definitely.
So that, I would say that he would be someone that at least opened the door to, you don't know everything, and maybe you should just listen to what other people are saying. And like back to what we were talking about in terms of the arguing, even just that, if all these people are doing this, there must be something to it. So
Yeah.
maybe, a good operating procedure for your life is that you might be wrong about everything, and that good, smart, and kind people might disagree with you. And if you can fully embrace those two things, I think that you get a lot further in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just being able to listen. That's, I realized a long time ago, my previous business partner, was he's an upstanding person, very open-minded, very humble. And I had an interaction when he was the manager at the run shop I just worked at part-time before we owned the run shop together. And this woman had come in, and I'm fresh out of college myself, just real full of myself, not I was not the Aaron that is before you today. I was not humble. I was I was egotistical, that's for sure. I was arrogant, and she mentioned her 5K, and I I didn't think anything of it. This is something that this woman was proud of, right? And this is not my proudest moment. I didn't acknowledge that she had just put a performance of her life and wanted to share that with me, share that moment that she was proud of, and I didn't recognize it. And he pulled me aside after that interaction and, showed me the error in my way and said, listen, like, these are people that want to talk to you because they want to learn from you. Like, you have to open up your ears and your heart to understand like where these people are coming from, and that not everybody is an elite. And that conversation pivoted my life. I From that moment forward, I recognized that I was an asshole and that I just needed to stop being an asshole and listen to people and recognize and appreciate everybody, whoever came through that door or whoever came into my life, and hear their story and be compassionate and give them, uplift them for what they've done. Everybody, they're always wonderful. It's, and that's, I think, something that Strava can, we can, we see what each other are doing, and that's kind of elevated everybody because it becomes more of a social, right? Like, we get to say congratulations, well done, that's awesome, whereas, before we didn't have that, and I guess I just didn't recognize that. So, now it's about really giving back, and that's what became after I had that conversation with him is, well, how can I give back to running? And that's what everything since then has been about for me. The podcast, the race directing, the store, the coaching. How do I give back to this sport that's given me so much? Like, and that's what I think about every time I do something, whatever change in life I have, if I can give back in some way, that's what I want to do.
How did this podcast start? I mean, you may have probably already told the story to your people 1,000 times, but
yeah, I felt I had something to share, right? Like, I felt I had conversations that I wanted to have. It was right as COVID was starting, actually. And one thing that I wanted to do was connect with people on a more interpersonal, like we're doing, having these conversations. I felt like the world in general was just kind of becoming more and more confined. We were becoming, as we were talking about earlier, more virtual and having our discussions online through typing rather than just having these, be it a virtual conversation, you and I are talking back and forth. And that was something that I felt like was diminishing in my life, was that just interpersonal conversation about anything. We've talked about multiple topics here, some not at all about running. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to have these discussions, and from these conversations, people are taking away so much more. I didn't want it to just be like, oh, Scotty, what's the latest race you've done? What's the race you're doing? Like, I wanted to actually get deep down into the nitty gritty, talk about like those darker moments. How'd you get through them? What did you do? Like, what's your mentality? Like, how did you train? What were some things that were successful for you? So all that kind of stuff, that's what I wanted to bring these conversations to, so that people had takeaways. Like, a lot of times I'll listen to an interview, and they'll interview an elite or something like that, and it's just about their race, and I don't take away much. I'll be honest. It's cool, it's amazing. Like, again, I recognize the effort and the amount that went into that race, not to take away that, but I don't pull anything from it. I'm not learning a lot from it. Sure, I can take inspiration away from it, but I want to learn something. Teach me about, like, well, how did you get there? How did you get through that tough moment? Like, what were the actual actions you took, the tools, the mental tools that you took to get through that? And that's what I like to dig into. And in all my conversations, it's, I hope people can take stuff away from, everything. And I'm sure this conversation, there's been a lot here that people can take away from things that you and I have both said. But that's where it all started, was just creating these genuine conversations. As I said to you, I don't have any questions read out. There was nothing in my mind that was like, this is some key things that I want to touch on with Scotty. it was just having a conversation and letting our creativity just take over and say, here's what today's going to be, and that's what's been fun. And sometimes it's just a solo episode, and I'll talk about a training principle, or I'll talk about things that I went through in the Grand Slam, stuff like that. But overall, I just wanted to have a different platform and just ways to get out there, because people reach out to me and they ask me questions like, well, how do you deal with this? And then I'll go off on a whole episode about that. So it's just a platform for me to be able to reach out and, again, just kind of give back and share my knowledge, at least what I have with. And if I don't know, I try to find a guest that does. That's I'm never too shy to say, I don't know. Let me find somebody that does. So that's where the podcast came from.
I mean, that's not that different from me,
Right.
and I started running a little bit after you, but I was listening to podcasts early, and it seemed like it was always the same format. It was always, oh, Aaron, you just won the Leadville.
Right.
How did you do it? How did you train? How was your race? What was your,
Right.
Oh,
right.
you're so awesome. Come back again. You're awesome.
Yeah.
And it was just like, as a, a slow, overweight, busy, unaccomplished, and ungifted runner, I wasn't really getting that much out of that, except that, like, you're awesome. Like, that's great.
Right.
Scott Jurek's awesome. I get it. But,
Yeah.
And at one point, Ultra Runner podcast, Eric Trans,
Yes.
who's a good friend of mine, he had a guy on called Chris Russ Thomas, the Kansas City Kid. And he was a 350-pound ultra runner who had just finished his first 50-miler, and he was overcoming his addiction to eating, like a overeater's problem.
Okay.
And he told this story about how he was a traveling business guy, and he would go to these hotels. Like people leave their room service trays out in the hallway.
Right.
He would scoop it up on his way into his room and take all that food with him and eat it. Like, that's how bad his addiction had become.
Gotcha.
And it was just like, I was like, this is what I want to hear. This is like a real fucking,
absolutely.
Boy,
real people.
Imagine.
Right?
Yeah.
Real shit.
So when I have people on, my goal, like I just did your coach, Pat Regan.
Yep.
My goal is, when it's over, I want you to feel like, you know what? I kind of get him now.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I know him.
Yep.
And so that was always just like my MO when interviewing people.
Absolutely.
But it was not that different than yours.
Well, there's just so many people out there, right? Like, I mean, there's so many cool people with so many cool stories. And, as you were saying, it's just like, I'm not trying to grab, like, I'm not trying to put Scotty Kummers on there just to grab some new listeners. Like, that's not my intent. Is you have stuff to share. And that's the deep down dirty of it is like, I find interesting conversations with people that, have a good story to share and are willing to share it. As you said, you'll come on any podcast anytime. And, I appreciate
wants to talk to me for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's multifaceted, the podcast. I can't say like it has like a core, like this is my routine, or this is my key guest. 'Cause I'm all over the place, honestly. Like, I've talked about workouts people can do, because that's what people ask me about. They're like, hey, like, what are some really good tempo workouts? Like, what should I expect? What effort should I put into it? For how long? What kind of intervals? So I just did a whole podcast episode on tempo running, so just sharing that. Not that, like I said, not that I'm the end all be all source, but I've been running for 33 years now. Like, I've had a lot of experience in this sport. I've had a lot of coaches and I've learned a lot. So just time for me to share it, and this is a good platform to do it. So
are you on the Patreon?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah. And like, if you're listening to this and you're not a patron, I mean, it's time for you to just go be a patron. Just, like there's, when I think about, I always talk about some, my show is like, what can you do in the world for like $2?
Yeah.
Like nothing. You can't do anything.
Right.
So if you're listening to, 3 episodes a month, they're an hour a piece. It's 6 hours.
Right.
For $2.
Yeah.
There's like nothing in the world that's that cheap. So if you listen to a podcast, and maybe this isn't the show that you listen to, and if so, I'm not talking to you, but if you're listening regularly and you subscribe and you download it and you're not a patron, what the hell are you doing? Like it just boggles my mind. And then if you want to know, is this guy in it for the money and is he in it for the downloads? I immediately know that's not true when I see the September 21st Grand Slam Megasode, 4 hours and 11 minutes, which isn't longer than my longest, by the way, just so you know. You didn't beat me. I did a 5.5 hour one-on-one with Camille.
Oh my gosh.
We did like all day.
That's amazing.
Um, and you know what? People say it's their favorite episode.
That's awesome.
Like the diehards, they loved it. They listened to it more than once.
Yeah.
But if you were just in it for the downloads, you'd have broken that up.
Oh,
you'd have had it. You'd have had like 10 episodes.
6 parts, but yeah.
Yeah, well then you get all the downloaads.
Right. But no.
That's why these guys do this thing, like, you know, like like it's really irritating, the Western States preview, when they do like 15-minute interview of 50 different people, and you're just like, come on, you know?
I know.
How many previews do we need?
Gunks up your inbox for the podcast. It's like, but yeah, it's no, it's definitely not. It's a great, media that I just really have grown to love. It has made me, I feel like, a better conversationalist, just in general, and that's something that I wanted, selfishly. I wanted to become better at having conversations and, being more open with people and open about myself and my, my experiences, which has really helped, and sometimes I think that's what's missing. Again, going back to that is just that ability to have an open and honest conversation, and not get mad at somebody for their opinion, and just listen. And, you can express yours, and, you can walk away both with still, admiration and respect for each other, because, we different opinions, but that's okay. Like, that's your opinion. That's mine. We're not saying you're wrong or I'm right, and vice versa. It's just a conversation. So,
I love some of those people too, though. Like, those are some of my favorite people. Like, I just interviewed, I don't know if do you know who, what's her name? I just interviewed her. Her name's Hannah Walter. She has alopecia.
Okay. Yes.
She's a marathon runner.
Yes. And from Charlotte.
She lives there. She's from Wisconsin.
Okay, but she lives in Charlotte, right?
She does.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Oh, she's so fascinating. If you ever get a chance, you should have her on. You'd love her.
I've listened to podcasts with her. She is.
But we disagree about everything strongly. Like in the sports world, like you're just wrong. You just don't know what or there was another one that Allie Bailey. She's a really famous British lady who's super opinionated, and we like fought on this, like in like we're talking about like playlists. But I'm like going through a playlist. I'm like, oh, Allie, like Saint Elmo's Fire. What the hell is wrong with you? Like, wow, how could you even like that song? But I tend to really like those people that get in your face and disagree with you and can have fun with it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We've had those conversations, and it's I like talking to the spectrum. I've talked to shoe developers. I've talked to, store owners, and they have their personal opinions about what's right for people and what's wrong for people. And mine may differ. And that's, again, like, we talk about these things, and, you get comments from people, like, sure, they have questions that they want follow-ups and stuff. And that's fine. Like, I'm not afraid to, like, bring them back on and talk about things. I had Peter Defney on about Vespa. Like, there's people are like, well, does he have scientific proof? And, I tried to ask Peter, but he doesn't go by the scientific proof part of it. So, take it or leave it. Right?
He had a good one with Coop. They went at it, the two of them.
Yeah.
That was a good episode.
Yep. Absolutely. So, but having these conversations, it's all part of it, but people ultimately have to go out there and do their own research, right? Don't take my word for it. Like, look at the research. That's something they said to us at the coaching conference, is like, don't take everything at face value, right? Especially like the people that are on Instagram or TikTok or anything, these influencers, like, do your own research, like, look at the studies, and if you don't know, ask somebody that's done or read the studies, at least, to what is the reality behind this. Is this true? Is this false? Should I go by it? Like, because a lot of times we see this product placement, and it's because, so-and-so is using it. Well, then maybe I should use it. Well, again, find out about it. It's not just that they're using it. Like, find out if that's a valid reason to use it. Is it?
Well, and there's some things that you can't explain why, like there's, for instance, like nutrition. Yeah, I get it. You can tell me about the number of calories that I can digest, and we can break down nutrition and from a
Right.
scientific standpoint and all that stuff. But at some point, you get to a point where you're a great runner and you say, you know what? Grilled cheese sandwiches are the only thing that I don't throw up after mile 80. Like I need to eat grilled cheese sandwiches. And it's for whatever reason, that's what I can eat. Oh, is this your dog? Look at that.
Yeah, yeah. This is Miles.
My dog's one of her best friends is a mini Aussie.
Oh yeah, he was just whining, so I had to give him a little attention.
How much does he weigh?
He's 25 pounds.
Oh God, you're so lucky.
Yeah,
My
I know.
puppy's 70 pounds.
He's fun.
But like nutrition, that's one of those things that like the
Oh yeah.
science might say A, B, and C, but at the end of the day, what's the answer? If
Oh
if
yeah.
if you tell me the science says I should be eating that and I'm throwing up, well, that's great, but I'm still throwing up.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. Right. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I agree. It's hard. I mean, there's so much out there, and that's a lot of the things that we talked about at the conference, like all these recovery tools. Um, we had three different discussions and they all brought up recovery tools, be it PTs, doctors. There was Dr. Nick Tiller. He kind of goes through pseudoscience and kind of debunks a bunch of stuff. Anyway, like three different conversations, and they're all like, your recovery tools, they're if you are healthy, they're not helping you recover. There's nothing about them, foam rolling, massage guns, all of these things that we put money into, they're not doing anything for you in the recovery sense. Now, if you're injured and you go to your doctor or PT, they may have a reason for you to use it in order to help regain some mobility and function. But if you're using them as recovery tools, they're not doing that. If it feels good, if you feel good afterwards, the placebo effect has taken effect because you're feeling good now, that's fine. They're not hurting you. So if you want to use them, it's totally fine. They're not going to hurt you. It's just, don't expect them to help or aid with recovery. If you could spend time doing something else, do that. If you could spend more time running, do that. That would be, more helpful than using recovery tools. So, just some really interesting stuff. Again, like don't take things at face value. Like all these things that were thrown out, the Normatec boots, etc. Like, like these are really expensive things, but like, what's the studies? What are they saying? I know the companies are saying these are, used for compression and they increase circulation, decrease swelling. Well, like, is that the reality? Is it really doing that? Do we need to reduce swelling? Isn't swelling the inflammation? Isn't that what's helping us recover? So, think about these things too. So, but yeah, it's, it seems like there are a million products out there. There's a million things that take our attention. And we have to be careful. Honestly, have to be careful. It was hard as a run shop owner, I remember when we went through the minimalistic phase, and this was a conversation that they had as well about, barefoot and minimalism and the five fingers. That was the hot thing at the time. And we held off. We could have made dollars there, but we held off. And the reason we held off was because we felt that people would use them negligently, like not use them as like, as we would breaking into using something that minimal, right? We were worried about injuries, even though they said, at the time they touted that those were going to reduce injury. We were scared that people would just throw those on and just start doing tons of miles. And some people could get away with that, but we were worried people would get hurt. And so we stopped, we held off. So, were we right? I mean, to some degree, but it's just thinking about the things that you're doing and are they right? Are they going to help you, or are you just, wasting your money? That's the hard part, right?
Well, and maybe at the end of the day, does it really matter? Like if you're me and you're, lucky if you can run, a 10-minute mile for 10 miles, do I really need the recovery boots? Is that really going to make a big difference in my world? I mean,
Right, right.
I'm not at the margins, I'm
Yeah,
not trying to like shave a second off of my time.
yeah,
I'm just trying to not be injured and stay motivated and go out and have fun,
yeah, 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 absolutely. It's and that's what it, again, going back to it, that's what it should be. Going out there and having fun.
No,
That's
it
where
also has to kind of irritate you sometimes too, that there's this whole like coaching. It's really weird to me that coaching has turned into paying famous runners to be your friend.
Mm, mm,
That like
mhm.
there's nothing about some of these coaches, and I'm not thinking of anybody in particular when I say it, but
Sure.
like let's say Courtney. Let's say Courtney starts coaching.
Yeah.
Courtney
Yeah.
coaching. She'd fill up her roster immediately.
Oh,
She
absolutely.
could charge as much money as she
Yeah.
wanted, and it would be great. Courtney's my coach. I'm coached by Courtney. I mean, of
Right.
course I know what I'm doing. I'm coached by Courtney. And you just say, what is it that shows you that she knows how to be a good coach? Like
Yeah.
what? I mean,
Right. Right.
there's a lot of like that. That first wave of coaching was all the famous ultra runners were coaches. That was it.
Hmm.
And I always wondered. Now, did you know who Andy Noyes was?
I don't think so.
He was a Southern California guy. He was
Okay.
really big, and he had been a great runner when he was a kid. But like he was older and stuff. He died a few years back. But
Okay.
like I remember talking to him and thinking like, because one of the points that he had brought up was, you know, do you know what it's like to be barely making the cutoffs? Do you know what like when
Yeah.
you're like
Yeah.
when you're telling the story about how everybody was quiet at Leadville, I was thinking, well, that wasn't my experience. If you were in the back and the we're all gonna die and we're never gonna make it group, we were really chat and what we kept talking about was at least that dream catcher hasn't gotten us yet. Like that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like I mean, and I don't know if you've ever been DNF'd for time reasons in a
I
race.
have not. I have not.
Okay. But there's a point where it's not ultra math anymore. It's just reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reality sets in. And for me, it was on the top of the it's the climb right before you get to the
Power
outward
line.
bound.
Power line.
What is how but the going the other way you call it with something else. It's the
Oh. Anyway.
you know what I'm
Well,
talking about.
by yes, yes, yeah, by Mount Elbert, right?
You're about to come down the power line.
Okay.
Like
Yes.
that you climb
Yep.
up and then you
Yep.
come down.
Right. Right. I forget
And
the backside. Yeah.
I gotten lost and like got off course. There's this whole thing. But I got to the top of where you're looking down the hill and it's
Yes.
like now it's the just sharp downhill to the
Yep.
road where you
Yep.
go to the next aid station.
Right.
And my friend Ryan Wanless is there, and Ryan's a Diderot 1,000 mile finisher. He's a fucking bad. His wife finished fifth in the race,
Oh wow.
but he's standing there with his trekking poles, and he just looks at me. He goes, it's done. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it's over. Like there's no point in even pretending like we might get to that aid station in time. Like it's over. So then your whole demeanor shifts from like running for your life and to just like the
Yep.
walk of shame into the aid station at the end. And you're no longer in a hurry. And then of course the dream catcher catches you and you're just like, that was the last thing I had in life was that the dream, and then he just
Yeah.
comes running by and you're like, I just want to trip him, right? Like that guy. Um, but there's that feeling, right? And like you said, you don't know that feeling. I'm sure my coach probably doesn't know that feeling, but like there's value in having a conversation with someone that knows what it's like
Oh,
to
absolutely.
feel that way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that like maybe you and I are, in our phase of this interviewing people, we've recognized that value and it's no longer just the format of, like, hey, Scotty, you did great at Leadville. Let's talk about your Leadville performance. It's like, you know what, Scotty, you're a notorious podcaster and race director who knows a lot of people in the sport, and you just ceremoniously ate complete garbage on the trail and barely made it to mile 25. How does that feel when the whole world is watching? And, like,
Totally.
but those are things too, because, and I don't know if you and I talked about this at the race, but this is something that I talk about a lot. And that's that there are two very distinct outcomes of my Leadville performance. First, I could heave my overweight body over that finish line right before the gun goes off in all the glory and have the whole boulevard lit up and people wondering why are they cheering so much for who the hell is that, and then it's like this moment that everybody shares and I can't believe he did it, and like,
Yeah.
and everyone gets inspiration in that moment,
Yeah.
even the worst runner on the worst day looks at that and says, anything is possible if that guy can finish this race, right?
Right.
That's huge.
No, totally.
And when I die at mile 24, and my hopes and dreams of 4 years of training and coaching and all of this and people traveling all over the country, renting a condo, the money, the acclamation, everything I put into this race is for nothing. And I blew it and I failed miserably, publicly, in humility. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's also somebody watching that who's saying, you know what, I've been avoiding signing up for that half marathon because I'm afraid I'm not going to make it, or I'm afraid I'm going to be in last place, or I'm afraid I'm going to fail. And look at this asshole just failing in front of everybody like a movie star, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what am I afraid of?
Right.
Maybe
right.
I'll go try. And there's value in that too, you know?
Totally.
And I'm cognizant of that. And I think that it's very easy for us to look at, and you've been a race director, and you probably have forgotten some of the people that won, or that broke the course record, or that flew in that thing unexpectedly, you know, in the middle of the night, and you gave them their buckle. But you never forget that person that is finishing that you would never have thought could finish, and who's using every single inch of their being to try to heave themselves. And you know, some of them, in my case, are half marathons. They've only dreamed of finishing a half marathon, and I'm there for the moment. You know, like those people, you know, they need inspiration too. Absolutely. You know, and they need something that's relatable. So I think we forget about that. Totally. Not me and you, but as a sport.
Well,
you know,
when Trina talked to you on your podcast, you know, she's told you about, I did not follow the leaders. I followed the tail end, and I followed them through cutoffs, and I was there and gave them the cutoff because I know how hard that is. Like, no, I haven't experienced it, but I know how hard that is and how much it hurts. So I wanted to be the one that told them, you didn't make it this time. I sincerely am amazed by your performance. And, you know, I wanted to be as genuine and there for them as I could, because those are the people that, you know, they're putting it on the line, sometimes more so than those leaders, you know, and that's why I wanted to be at the back and seeing these people, because these are the people that I know are going to have the toughest time. Yeah. I mean, you know, leaders have a tough time. Sure. Like they push themselves really hard, but you know, the people at the back, they're out there. I mean, you know, Western States, when I ran, like I was worried about the cutoff for a while. Like I was behind. I was starting to get like, am I going to make it to the end of Western States? It took me 24 hours to finally feel good. I felt awful up until 24 hours, and then finally ran it in and got in with like an hour and a half to spare. That was scary as you know what. That's the first race of the Grand Slam, and I was struggling that hard. So, you know, I know these moments, and, you know, the human spirit is a testament. And when my runners that I coach, when they have a DNF, I take it as a personal reflection. What could I have done differently? That's the first question I ask. You know, not what could they have done differently? What did, you know, of course, I assess what went on, takeaways that like, I'm like, hey, we have some talk points here, things we can work on for the future. But I also have to reflect and look back through their training and says, were there anything differently that I could have done that would have made that race a success? And if so, how can I implement that moving forward? And what can I learn from this so that other runners don't make the same mistake? So, you know, it's, as a coach, it's, if you know, you take these things in, and yeah, I mean, you know, as I said, I'm very emotionally wrapped up in whatever I do. And my runners are the same. They're, you know, I really care about their performances because I know they really care about it. That's what has to be important. So if you're talking to a coach, you know, what do they understand? Like, what is their background, right? Like, are they just an elite that's just going to spit out like a mimic of what they've done? Or do they understand your physiology a little bit more? Do they understand what you should be working on? Do they understand that you should be working on walking? I think that's underestimated and undervalued in ultra training. You know,
strong agreement.
So all of these things, you know, so in finding a coach, it's really a big talk. And I had a conversation with an amazing woman that's, you know, she's finished second at Leadville, and we were talking at the conference, and she's looking for a coach. And my conversation wasn't steering her towards, well, like, would you want to be coached by me? I was listening to what she was saying and trying to analyze what would be the best fit for her. And what was the best fit for her was another female. So I was trying to suggest other females that would meet her need, other female coaches that I knew. So it's when I look at coaching and you come to me and I say, I may not be the best fit because this is how I do things and you're expecting something different. I may be able to suggest a different coach. That's, it's a lot of coaches are just trying to take on athletes. I get that. It's our living. Like, I really understand that, but make sure it's the right fit, right? Like, it's the right person for you that understands you and what your demands are, how much time restrictions you have. That's a huge thing, like being a parent, that's a huge thing. It's, if you have kids, like, make sure your coach understands what those time constraints mean.
I was just thinking about that. Like,
yeah.
And then you say, well, do you have kids? No. I'm like, oh, well, then you don't get it, Right, I mean, right. And I'm not saying you have to I'm not saying that I can't imagine what it's like to have kids.
Right.
But, I can't imagine how I would layer my life over having kids as well. Yeah. And I'm sure there are people that are busier than me that have kids. I mean, the president has kids. I mean,
yeah. It's not to say that elites don't make good coaches. There are elites out there that have very
good. That's not what I'm saying.
No. Right? No, I did not hear that.
My coach is an elite runner. My coach won the Badger.
So, yeah, like I said, it's not to say that elites make bad coaches. I have an elite, that's a coach, and he's a great coach. Patrick is awesome. But like, it's not always the case. And it's not always the case that, non-elites are great coaches either. So you just have to be
and
careful.
That's not a good reason to have a coach that they're elite. That's in and of itself, so my coach, and I want to brag on her for a second, but I picked my coach, Eliza Howard.
Okay.
Because my dream is to finish Leadville. I'm gonna go back again, and maybe I'll get one more checkpoint, but I'm going back. Like, I want to finish Leadville.
Yeah.
And she has won Leadville, but more importantly, she trains for Leadville at Flat. She lives in San Antonio.
Yeah.
So she knows the challenges of a runner having to go there and finish, and coaches a lot of people on Leadville. But the one thing about Liza, so leading up to the race, I was so stressed out about the fact that Eliza was driving 18 hours from San Antonio to pace me.
Mm-hmm.
She was going to pace me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay her money to do this. Like, I didn't pay her to be my pacer. She was just coming because she wanted to pace me.
Yeah.
And I felt like I'm probably not going to even get halfway. And she's coming all this. And I even told her, you don't need to come. There's other people that will, and she drove all the way there, watched me fail, hung out with me. And before she left, she said, thanks for having me as your coach, like, not next time train harder, and of course we're going to have all kinds of things. But that she appreciates the journey that we've been on, and I kind of like that. So, and the reason why I picked her, I have a coaching call with her tomorrow, even though I told her the last coaching call, we have nothing to talk about. Because I'm not running for the next 8 weeks. I can barely sit on this chair,
Right.
But she's like, well, we'll just still talk. And we've even paused the billing during this period, there's nothing for her to gain. But the first time I met her, she was waiting for someone to come to a checkpoint that she was coaching, and the look of nervousness and excitement. And, and I was like, that's what a coach, because I always pictured, Ian Sharman's the head guy of that. And I always picture Ian Sharman's on his big golden bed, looking at his screen going, when's that asshole going to DNF? I don't imagine him chewing his nails and being like, is Kummer going to finish? Whereas Liza, definitely. Yeah. And I may be, assassinating his character unjustifiably. I just know that when he sends me the bill and says, you got to send in your money, he never says, I hope your training for Leadville is going well. It's always just, you need to pay the bill,
Right.
So I've always, and I've always thought it would be fun to have 10 Junk Miles coaching. Why don't we have coaches here that, not me, but people that people like me that could be your coach and stuff like that. Cause I'm interested. I've never gone too deep into the subject. I was close cause I have this thing with Coop. Me and Coop have all these disagreements. And I think that he thinks that I'm someone that I'm not. I think that he thinks that I have an agenda, blah, 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 but we strongly disagree on some stuff. And then I invited him on, but then it kind of like fell apart. It turned into like he'll come on my show if I want him to, where I was just like, if you think I got you wrong, come on and tell me where I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then it turned into he's doing me a favor by coming on the show. I was like, I don't need this. But like I'm interested in subjects like non-compete agreements with coaches and coaching companies. I think that that's a very fascinating subject. And I know that he has non-competes. And, like when I see him talk about, being pro runner or things being anti-runner, I always think non-competes, that's anti-runner. Like that's, the kind of issue where if you're working for him and you're my coach and then you leave and then I can't have you anymore because you have a contract with him.
Right.
That seems kind of but I know that there's a reason for it on the other side and there's a counter argument, but I'd like, and then also the rift between him and the Roaches that's become very public, that was another thing that was just like, I would, so this whole thing started because someone had him on their show and I was like, how could you not ask about that stuff? Like, how could you not, because people are afraid in interviews to ask uncomfortable questions that are going to, rub people the wrong way.
Right.
You gotta ask those questions,
Oh, totally. Yeah. Total transparency. Like, they recruited me for CTS a number of years ago. And, I look through expectations, and at the time, I don't know what it is now. My athletes were expected to become CTS athletes, all of them. And, when I discussed that possibility with them, they said they couldn't afford it. Now that was a red flag for me. Right. And that's what I expressed when I told Coop, I'm sorry, I just can't lose my clients. Like, that's, me signing on to CTS doesn't weigh out enough for me to sign on. Like, I don't want to lose these people. These are people that are, my friends, people that I've coached for a number of years. Like, that means a lot to me and I don't want to lose them, and so that's I ultimately said no thank you, to CTS. And I can't tell, like, Coop is, he knows so many people that every time he sees me, it's like he's meeting me for the first time. So I can't tell if there's, he's just doesn't remember me, or, harbors some kind of negative because I didn't come on board.
And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's me sometimes too, I mean,
oh, totally. Yeah, no, you meet a lot of people, right? Like, I get it. Like, that's for sure. But is it right for the person? That's the big thing, right? Like, some coaches like that, they're just trying to get their start, and that's a great opportunity that, to sign on with somebody like CTS, because then CTS can help provide athletes to that coach. So I get it. Like, and I get a lot of coaches that come to me and say, hey, if you're full, would you mind referring to me? And if I know you, if I know your coaching style, like, yeah, I have no problem like that. But if you're a brand new coach, I want the athlete to, have a good coach. I don't know enough, it's nothing against them personally. It's just, I don't know them.
Hey, I know all about that as a lawyer. People come to me and they're like, can you refer me to somebody? And I'm like,
right.
And then when that sucks, are you going to come back and tell me about,
right.
Why'd you send me to that guy?
Yeah. And that's why I haven't, I tried to take on a coach and it didn't work out because, we weren't on the same page, and I tried getting us on the same page, but we weren't. So I've just stayed solo, like I like what Ian does, what CTS does, you lose some autonomy as a coach. And that's something we discussed at the conference was, losing that autonomy of who you are and what you do and how you do things, right? Because you have to conform to a certain standard. And I didn't want to conform to really someone else's standards like this, nor do I want to force another coach to conform to mine. And that's why I've just decided to stay independent and just do my own thing and not take other coaches on under me. Like, I don't mind mentoring other coaches. I have coaches that come to me for mentoring. I don't mind that at all. If they want to learn, I teach them. That's fine. But, at the same time, like, it's a lot to ask somebody to come under my umbrella and do things the way I do. So I didn't want to force anybody into that situation. So,
well, and my supposition, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have the privilege of being able to do that because you don't need to coach people to pay the mortgage every month, which allows you to, and that's something that I always try to stress when I talk about myself and my business and my podcast business and my running business, is that none of it has to pay the mortgage. So, to the extent that there's somebody out there saying, well, that's really nice, it's harder for me, like people that are professional race directors or that are, and that are grinders,
Mhm.
like Sherpa John, like
Yeah,
there's a guy that's how he pays his mortgage,
right.
and
Right.
if he doesn't have a good year in race directing, he has a financial problem. That's not the case for me. If I break even race directing, I go, oh, I had a lot of fun. I changed some lives,
Well,
you know?
coaching is, I mean, that is, thank God my wife's a doctor, but coaching is my primary income, but I mean, it's, it's sustainable, it's manageable. Like when people ask me how many athletes I have and I tell them, they're like, how on earth do you do that? And I say, it's my full-time job. This is what I do for a living. This is, I schedule 6 hours a day and I check on my athletes for 2 to 3 hours a day. So, I mean, my day is typically about, 8 to 9 hours on training peaks. That's the reality of coaching. And they're like, you do that much? I'm like, what do you do for your full-time job? You work 8 to 9 hours. Do you not? Like, that's not the reality? Like, that's what I do. That's my full-time job. That's my expectation is to meet my athletes' expectations. And I tell them that. I said, hold me accountable, right? Like everybody holds you accountable as a race director. Like, why would you not hold me accountable as a coach? Right? Like, it's you have success metrics, like how do you do at your races? So we measure your success. Am I doing good for you, or do we need to change things, or do you need a different coach? Those are tough conversations, but I mean, that's the reality, you
Now,
know?
someday I want to turn around and interview you on 10 Junk Miles. And one of the things I want to talk about, but I'm going to ask you a question about right now is you were a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have you ever thought about writing a book
Yes.
about being a stay? Because like my former business partner, he was a stay-at-home dad too, and I saw firsthand like sometimes the way people treat you, or sometimes like, oh, that's cute, you're so lucky, like, and sometimes they don't realize the reality of being a stay and the
Oh,
struggles of being a stay-at-home dad as opposed to a mom, or being a stay-at-home dad in a stay-at-home mom world, and like all of the
yeah.
intricacies of that. I think it's a very interesting subject, and I think it's a very misunderstood
Oh,
subject
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
I would love to dive into more when you and I talk on our show. And
Sure.
but I do think someone should write a book about that, because
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting subject.
It is. It is. It has been definitely a a huge learning curve. Especially when number two came around. That was definitely made things a lot more challenging. But I wouldn't change it. Like I've had everybody always says they grow up so fast, but I have been there every step of the way. Like what everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe he's a teenager. I'm like, I can. I've been there every step of the way. I've seen every moment of it. Like that's the great thing is that I've been here through everything. I've been able to go to every game, like I've been there in all their moments. Like there's very rare times where like I didn't make it to something. And that's awesome. Like I have no regrets about, the way everything worked out. And neither does my wife. I mean, obviously she wishes she could be around a little bit more, but she loves her job. She loves what he does. She loves her children. And when she's has the time, on the weekends, she's all about them, whatever they want to do, and it's amazing. She's an amazing mom. And it's been a challenging dynamic at times, but we've made it work.
And now, is there a retirement plan for being a stay-at-home dad? Is there like a year where you're going to say, at such and such a year, I'm done coaching,
Yeah.
I'm done podcasting, I am just going
Uh,
to retire and just
I,
enjoy my life?
I don't think so. I'm not built like that. My father, he's just like a, kind of that salt of the earth, just, grind until you die kind of guy, just always doing something, always has a project, even though he's retired, he's always doing something. And that's just the way I see myself. I can see myself as this gnarled old, guy just kind of hunched over and, still just cranking out training plans and talking to athletes. I'll probably still be coaching a local high school or something until they get rid of me. But no, that's that's the way I see myself in the future. Like my wife knows it. I mean, we may take like the RV trip across the US when we retire, but I think coaching is always going to be a part of it. So I enjoy it. It's like it feels like I finally found a really good calling. I used to teach, and that's when I started coaching. Was back in 2000. Yeah, 2000 is when I first started coaching. And it's a cool profession. I've really come to enjoy it. I've learned so much, and I just continue. I think that's the biggest thing is like I enjoy learning and continuing to learn and evolve with our sport. because there's no real handbook for it yet. Marathoning, 5Ks, we pretty much understand exercise physiology. Like, we understand the training principles that are going to make you, successful. Ultra marathoning, it just keeps evolving, and there's so many dynamic parts to it, right? Like, you could do a track race, you could do a road race, you could do a trail race, you could do a mountain race, and there's so many differences, between the distances. Up now these races just keep getting longer and longer. So, we're having to write and rewrite because there's just so many different variables, aside from temperature and altitude. Like, you faced them both at Leadville, right? Like, there's so many things that we're trying to learn and incorporate into our sport. Is that, if you just try to apply a marathon plan to and just bump up the mileage, you're not doing a service to your athletes. So, yeah.
Well, and then there's also the whole winter running world, which doesn't get talked about as much as it should. But
yeah,
that was my big thing for a long time, is doing the winter races.
Yeah, yeah. And I was talking about earlier about the adverse effects of ultra running, and we went through the adverse effects of being constantly exposed to those colder temperatures and what that can do to your respiratory system. It was a really interesting conversation, and it hit home. I was like, wow, I have a few athletes, Wisconsin, Illinois, like the Midwest, where that temperatures are going to get really cold this winter, and I can't always expose them to the outside, right? Like, we're going to have to do some treadmill running just to keep them safe. Like, I can't have them, go out for a 4-hour run, totally outside. It may have to be like an hour indoor, an hour outdoor, an hour indoor, an hour outdoor, where, like, we have to be creative with it, because I don't want that constant exposure that, could affect their respiratory systems. So it's, you're right. Winter is another factor that is rarely considered, but like, when I brought home stuff from this conference, it definitely was a key takeaway. It made me think of a few athletes, like, right off the bat. But yeah, like I said, a lot in this sport. There is a lot in this sport, but man, we touched on a lot here, Scotty.
Wow. Well, why don't we do another one, and we'll do it online?
Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll do part 2.
Because we have a lot of North Carolina people, and we have, I think it would be really interesting, and to get more into your story, and coaching and stuff like that, and being a stay-at-home dad. Those are subjects that I'm really interested in. Yeah. We could talk about the fact that you said you were one and done at the Badger, which I want to pick apart a little bit and talk about a little bit more.
You got it. You got it. Absolutely. I'm one and done pretty much everywhere, Scotty. So aside from hard rock.
I have 2 weeks. I have the last dot standing, and that's my favorite race.
Oh, right on.
Where you run from Belleville to Dots and back over and over again.
Okay.
And the prize pot's up to like 1,600 or something like that.
Right on.
So
nice.
if you win the last person standing, you're going to bring home a little over $1,000. So
nice.
That's cool. That's a lot of fun.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's
Dusty's coming.
Nice.
Ellie Pell. There's some interesting people coming, so it should be fun.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, God, again, thank you for your time, man. Thanks for coming on and chatting with me. And yeah, we'll do it
anytime. Anytime.
You're
ask me to come on a podcast. I never say no. And then we'll do part 2 on 10 Chuck Miles, and we'll go. Right. We'll put a little bit more into Aaron. There'll be a little bit less Scotty, a little bit more Aaron, but it should be a lot of fun.
Well, you heal up, buddy. I really appreciate you. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much.
Again, Scotty, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure. I really just enjoyed our time and the conversation. Drew a lot of emotion, obviously, and apologies for the language on my part. And man, but I really did enjoy the conversation. Obviously, both of us are passionate about our sport, and that passion kind of showed in our conversation. So, but I hope you had some takeaways in there, of course. And if you have questions for either of us, reach out. Scotty is he's really good at responding to his emails, as I found out when I inquired about Badger and helping me finish up the Grand Slam and running Badger. Again, I can't express my gratitude enough for that, Scotty, so thank you. So anyway, I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. And moving forward, man, here we are, October. It's incredible. I love this month. I don't know about you, but it just makes me want to get out and run, and I am already itching to run. Got a few runs in. I just went to the UESCA conference, the Ultra Running Coaching Conference. Some great speakers, including Jason Koop and Nick Tiller, that's along with a slew of other guests that just had some great contributions. Stephanie Howell on nutrition. Really just enjoyed the conference. I took away so much and learned a lot, which was obviously the intent of going. So really happy that I went. Colorado Springs, this is an amazing place. Got to do the Manitou's Incline, which was a great experience, and got to run in the Garden of the Gods, meet some other great coaches, and just connect with our community in a different way. So really enjoyed my trip there. Glad to be home. That was the last trip of the year. I really hope not to leave North Carolina soil for the foreseeable future, unless I go over to the Smokies. I'm always okay with that. But aside from that, everything is moving along. I can't wait to run. I'm back to that point. I think this is kind of my last week. I may just go for a few jogs just because, as I said, I love this time of year. Feeling mentally and physically ready. As I said, I had some good runs there in Colorado Springs, 6,000 feet there in Colorado Springs. And obviously everything goes up from there. So, but just excited by the prospect of running again. Looking at putting my name into the Hard Rock Lottery next year would be the opposite direction of which I have not run. So I'd like to kind of finish that up, if I can. Obviously it's up to the lottery. So I'm going to put in the name for that. And then I'm going to have some backups, some other races as just in cases. My qualifier, for Hard Rock, obviously want to keep that going. And I'm on the fence, about Western States, about doing it again. I loved the experience. I love Tahoe, love all that. And it really comes down to, do I want to chase a sub 24 buckle? Or do I want to let somebody else have that opportunity? And I'm leaning towards I should let other people have that opportunity, because I was obviously, just gifted with the entry, through the raffle. Obviously I paid for that, but, I had my experience, albeit not the greatest, not the greatest race of my life. Probably one of the worst, to be honest, but, hey, I got to experience it. So for that, I'm grateful. And, it's so, I don't know what to do, but, as I said, I'm leaning towards just letting other people get in and have their experiences, and just kind of keep moving forward. And so, it's kind of an open-ended year right now. Like I said, some registrations and lotteries I'm thinking of putting in for besides Hard Rock. But we shall see. We shall see what 2024 brings. It's kind of hard having everything so open-ended, not knowing, but that's the way it is right now. It's, kind of as Scotty as I talked about. But coaching is, it's going super busy. Man, it's great to have conversation with new athletes. This is the time of year where a lot of transitions happen. Some folks finish up their goal races and want to take a break, and they're not sure what 2024 will look like, just like me. So they end their coaching, and it's part of the process. I don't have a contract that I ask people to sign for any period of time. I'm here for everybody's coaching needs. So if you're interested in coaching, please reach out. My contacts are in the show notes, and look forward to having that conversation with you. I may not be the right coach for you, and that's for you to decide. I'll tell you all about what I do and how I do it. If it sounds like it matches up well with you and your needs, I would love to have that relationship begin and share your journey to your running goals, and hopefully we meet them together. So please reach out. With everything going on with the travel and everything, I was not able to get the newsletter out for October 1st, but that's not to say it's not coming out. Just had quite a few things that I've been working on between the conference, the end of the season here for cross country, and kind of just organizing my thoughts. I have so many things that I want to write about, especially the Grand Slam. And I just can't seem to get them out on paper right now. Not quite writer's block, but I just don't know how I want to express it. And so I have a variety of ideas, but the newsletter will be coming out. So if you're interested in signing up for the newsletter, please do so on my website. I will be getting that out for sure. And we are kind of wrapping up the cross country season. The kids are doing great. What an amazing race that they all had yesterday. I just love this age group. For those of you who don't know, I'm coaching middle school, and my daughter's on the team, and it is just so much fun to see these kids racing. They're figuring it out, which is so cool. Yesterday, the other teams went out blazing fast because we're the team to beat. So they went out super hard, and I just yelled at my kids to slow down, run their race, and they just nailed it. Oh man, it was so fun to watch. They're just amazing. And we've got the conference meet next week, so excited for them. And then I'm going to take them to kind of the North Carolina unofficial state meet on October 21st and wrap up our season. So pretty cool. And then not long after that, we'll be getting into indoor track. So onward to indoor track, which I'll be obviously coaching the high school. They don't have indoor track in the middle school level, but I look forward to working with those kids again. I miss them. I spent so much time with them between winter track and spring track last year. It's kind of like missing a piece of yourself because you spend so much time with them, and then summer comes and cross country comes, and got this long hiatus. So I'm looking forward to seeing these kids again. And aside from that, like I said, all is well here, and I hope it is by you. I hope your training goes well. Obviously, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate the questions. I honestly do. I've got questions that come in over Instagram, Facebook, even Strava. Please, drop a question if you have someone. Happy to answer it. If it's something that needs longer explanation, I'll probably drop it on the podcast. So if you have anything that you want to hear about, topics or anything for podcast, let me know. If you have guests that you have in mind you think would be an interesting conversation that we could all take something away from, I'm happy to hear about that too. So don't hesitate to drop a line. As always, I appreciate you guys. I super appreciate my Patreon supporters. If you have an extra $1 or $2 per month, it really does help keep me going. So if you can sign up on Patreon, please do so. Link is in the show notes. Link's on my website, runningislife.run. So, and if you want to learn more about my coaching services, again, check out my website. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this podcast, for listening, and for continuing to support the Running is Life podcast. So until next time, keep moving forward, keep running, my friends.